Hello, everyone. Once again, I am back. My name is Billy. I'm the Emergency Management Solution Specialist here at D4H, back with another phenomenal live stream. And today, this is my first time doing this type of live stream. We are welcoming back an old and just as important guest from Clinton County Emergency Management Agency in Ohio. We're talking to Mr. Tom Brickle. So let's bring Tom in here. Hello, Tom. Welcome back. Long
Hey,
time no
Billy,
see.
how
Well,
you
I guess
doing?
for me, I've never met you before today. So
Well, I've
sweet.
seen you quite a bit on some of the different videos you've been doing over the last year.
I've heard. I'm not a social media person, and now it's my entire career. So guess that's just the future. But I hopefully we have some people in on the chat today talking with us. But for those that may have never heard of Clinton County, or maybe they're just joining into D4H for the first time, or maybe they're returning friends, why don't we start off by talking a little bit about yourself, your background, and then a little bit about Clinton County.
All right, so I grew up here in Wilmington, Ohio, a small agricultural area. The city has got a population somewhere between 14 to 16,000. Our county's got a population about 42,016, I think, for the last census. And it's one of those rural counties that is kind of almost like some of the bigger towns. And one of the things about that is because we got this huge airport that I can see out the window, which is one of the largest cargo airports in the United States. And because of that, we're not quite entirely rural, even though about 90% of our land is for agricultural use. After I graduated from high school, I went into the Marine Corps, did that for about 4 years, got out, went to Wright State. I was also in the Air National Guard. And then after 9/11 happened, I went full-time active duty with the Air Force and traveled the world and got to see and do a lot of different things. And on the Air Force side, the career field became named as emergency management, but it also had a very strong CBRN focus, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thank you for
Mhm.
your service. And second, I know that the Air Force apparently gets a lot of bag, but I think the Air Force is so cool. I mean, you guys get to fly the cool ships and everything. So that's just my opinion, but that's awesome.
Well, each service has got its strengths, so it just depends on what you're looking for and what you want.
Absolutely. And, it's nice to talk to another hometown individual. So I currently live in New York. I actually grew up right down the street in my neighboring town, and now I moved back home. So I get that draw there. Although I don't do emergency management in my town, but that would be quite the experience, I'm sure. So I guess, let's talk a little bit more about, so you mentioned a lot about the agriculture, and I didn't know you guys had a cargo airport. That's actually something really interesting in terms of an emergency management aspect as well, if that's included in any of your plans. And I guess we'll get to that. But last time we chatted, or you chatted with Robin probably,
Mhm.
was a few years ago, 3 years ago or so. What has changed in Clinton County? How has your trends or your observations, your environment kind of adjusted over the past few years?
Well, we've gotten a little bit more connectivity. The state has a program that rolled out really internet connectivity across the board, especially in the rural areas.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's not a whole lot that has really changed here in town. It is still a community where a lot of people knows one another, by name, a lot of hand waving as we're driving down the roads. But what has changed is some of the weather impacts that we were seeing. So over the last 5 years, we've kind of seen it kind of slope up and start to come down. Matter of fact, last year in the state of Ohio, we set a historic record for the state for the number of tornadoes that we had. And
Mhm.
we had two last year, but then going into this year, it seems a lot less active, at least within our state. However, in the early part of April, we had three tornadoes in Clinton County on one early morning, like about 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's a little different. Other than that, just trying to use technology as it becomes a little bit more advanced to make things a little bit more efficient and to increase our ability to communicate with key populations.
Absolutely. And I did also want to talk about, a little bit of the sizing of your agency and organization, because a lot of our customer base are local EM, or even maybe a little bit bigger than local EM, I guess, depending on the geographic size. And, we were previously talking before the live stream, you said you're an office of one and you have a group of volunteers. But so since, we last spoke, what has changed, I guess, infrastructure wise or agency wise, that maybe that was a response with the purchase of D4H, or maybe it was just kind of like a natural happenstance of the evolution of your agency. But if you could talk to that a little bit as well.
Well, we did increase our staff by one part-time person who does the bookkeeping side and starts working on the volunteer aspect. Her name is Susan. She's great. She kind of makes sure that I don't overspend on things. And the nice thing is about D4H is we don't have to worry about that overspending. And this is, I can't emphasize this enough. I'm in a rural county. We've got a population just over 42,000.
Mm-hmm.
And D4H is one of those tools that I can afford, I can use on a daily basis, and I can actually bend it to my needs. Whether it's something that's EMA related, whether it's weather monitoring, whether it's supporting for an exercise, even for LEPC, for the local emergency planning committee that does a lot of the tier 3 and hazmat kind of stuff. I've got my form set up in there to where it's very simple to get information, pull it in, put it in a form, looks nice and professional, has a standardized look, versus beforehand where I was just kind of throwing everything into a Word document and trying to make everything fit a certain way. It's just one of those tools that is very customizable.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, because like I think every talk I have with customers, it's so fun being on these live streams too, because I hear you kind of speak the spiel that I speak to all of our customers, and it's nice to get that reassurance and validation, but also to relate personally a little bit too. So where I worked in EM for a little bit as well, and I was once commissioned out in California, and I was trying to make an IEP from nothing, and I made it off of Google Sheets. And now I use D4H, and it's just like, even if you have something as simple as a piece of paper or an electronic software, it's just second to none. It's just really is. Well, I say it's child's play all the time. Also, a quick sidebar. I see we have someone joining from Alaska. Welcome. Not sure if it's rural part or urban part of Alaska as well, but hopefully we find some good relations here in terms of connectability and how maybe the software can help you. But jumping into the actual software use, because you kind of already started talking about it a little bit, and I'll let you go on your soapbox for sure in a positive way of the software. So you use it in a daily way and also in an emergency, response way. But I'm interested to start first with the daily. How do you, because I get questions a lot from customers of, okay, I get that we can use this for an ICS activation or an EOC activation, but also as an office of one, how do you, what purposes do you use it for daily? How do you integrate different items? How do you communicate different ways? If you can kind of just speak to that.
So I'm going to go back a couple of weeks. Now, I wish I actually would have pulled this up. We had essentially multiple day after day after day hazmat incidents, and where I'm communicating with the Ohio EPA, the local on-scene coordinators, different jurisdictions, and of course everything was happening on I-71 in downtown Wilmington. So when I get in and I start using it, I always have that little standby incident ready to go. That way I click on it. It's pretty much set up for like a natural type disaster, but it has the basic items I need, and it's real easy to just go ahead and start filling stuff in, and then I can pull the forms in. Once I pull the forms in, and then it's very simple to populate the information. It's just sending the photos to myself, and I find that it's a lot easier. Instead of trying to print the form or save the form, that static link is really something that's a time saver, because you can email that to someone. Yep. Email it to yourself, and then you text it to someone. And if they're using the little smarty phone, they can just click on it real quickly and pull it up in the field and kind of look through there. And that's one of the things that my chief elected officials, we have some older people that are mayors, trustees, and in those types of positions. And in some areas, they're not as technologically kind of hip, or I techno fluent. And what they find is when they get that little link and they can click on it, and it pulls up and it has like that basic information, what the situation is, who's running the response, what the necessary or the potential impacts are, and a little map to kind of show them the places that are affected. That keeps them a lot more informed than trying to give them an account where they try to go in and see it. So I found for certain populations, that link keeps it very simple and very easy.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up political officials as well, because I have quite literally used that example where, so I used to work for New York City Emergency Management, and I guess it's the same for any local emergency management as well, but you have political officials breathing down your neck, waiting for an update for some sort of answer, because it's all about that front-facing media marketing and like getting the information out to the people. And in most of my demos, I'm like, listen, this link, the share by public link feature, what you're talking about, it's so good to be like, hey, Mayor, amazing. Here's this link. Click on it every 2 hours and you'll get your update. And it's just letting them play with their own toys in the browser, which I think gives us a lot more room to focus on what really matters in an emergency, for sure. You've mentioned a few elements so far, and I do want to also kind of focus on what you talked about before we jump to the live stream about making too many status boards. So I'd like to focus now, and I'm also guilty of this. I actually just cleared my entire demo account because I think I had like 180 status boards, and that was just too much to deal with. What features, I mean, you already talked about the public link, but in addition to status boards or forms or anything, are there any other features that you found to be indispensable to your operations with D4H? But then also, if you want to speak a little bit to your lessons learned in terms of getting set up with the software, realizing maybe we don't need status boards or we need forms. You're just going to talk about your logic and work through process of that.
So I'm going to take it more from a chronological standpoint. When I first got into the software, I saw it and I thought, this is amazing. This is something that I could really bend to a lot of different directions. And so the first thing I started doing was creating all these different forms. Now, I didn't have as many as you had, but I got up to about the high 60s before I got to a point and said, am I taking this too far? Do I have a problem? And so I kind of paused. And then I started going through the different forms that I had in paper because we were doing a lot of manual methods. And all I started doing is creating those different forms. And then as things come up and we did quick changes, the types of information that was going to go into the fields really informed the types of boards that I created. So I really should have done that the first time going back through there. But it is very easy to use. And the power of that static link, I have different populations or key publics or even key individuals that when I create those different boards, forms, or different pieces, I have very targeted list as to who gets what. For instance, we're under AES, or our power producer. So when I have a lifeline on there for AES, anytime there's for that, I send to her that link for that board for that particular entry. And then I do the same thing for Duke Energy, and I do the same thing for the BPA. That way, anything that goes on there when they're kind of doing the little tracking and update, I can send them a text message saying, hey, want to follow up on these outages, and I got a question on the board. Then they can go to that and they can kind of see what's going on. And it is extremely helpful for the general population. I've gone through and I created a form. It's called a PIO form. I got to come up with a better name for it. But essentially, it's saying who, what, where, when, why, what to do, when to do, where not to go, that kind of stuff. And that's a standardized form that I've created different ones depending upon what the weather events are. So if it's winter, there's some pre-scripted stuff that I saved in there. And if it's the other, severe weather, I've got all those things. And I link that to my webpage. So I actually have what's called an emergency notices page that when it's activated, I will send out a text notification that goes to all the people in our county that subscribe, get like somewhere about 12,000 people that are signed up in the current system, and they can go through and see, we got this coming. Here's the timeline, who's impacted and all that kind of stuff. And as I update those forms in D4H, and it's just hit that little refresh button when I make changes in the situation, they all get the same information at the same time. And it is one heck of a time saver.
Yeah, absolutely. And you perked two different questions that I wanted to follow up with in that spiel there. So the first, you mentioned community lifelines. Are you aware of our community lifelines extension pack, or did you make your own community lifeline status board?
I made my own, and then I'm constantly going through kind of refining the process. I went super detailed everything. Now I'm to a point where I'm kind of pulling back, and I like something that's a little bit more generalized, but it has different lines where I can put the history or comments and updates, because I know you can put updates in the log.
Correct.
But sometimes there's some more updates that are more specific to that item or that status board that you don't want to put into the log, because then people are trying to read and catch up to what's going on without making them experts on how to go through and filter that. It just makes it to where you're You're focusing on more where you're putting different types of pieces of information. If someone wants to really get into the weeds on
Yeah.
what the power outage is in Chester Township and Clinton County, they can go to that AES item on our lifelines, and then they can go, I see this outage, I see this outage, here's here. According to their restoration group, they're saying it's something impacting a substation. And they can see that kind of level of detail. And then if it gets to be something that's really bad,
Mm.
I've got a form that I've created. I'm still kind of tooling it
Yeah.
to where I share that with our local, state, and federal elected staff members,
Yep.
just in case something rises to that level of attention as to, hey, um, my voters in this district were involved or impacted by a very severe storm or tornado or something like that. That way they're aware of what's going on and kind of prevent from getting those calls at the wrong time trying to get information.
Right.
Everyone's getting the same type of vetted information versus, okay, maybe they get someone who picks up the phone and they give them something that's a little wrong, or they contact another elected official that hasn't been checking something. It's just trying to keep everything to where it's the same basic information, the same types of details,
Yep.
and you don't have a lot of those extraneous details kind of hanging off to the side.
Absolutely. And I do have another question I want to revisit, but you brought up a really great point, because again, when I speak to a lot of different customers, I mean, granted, I'm probably kind of boxing in the local emergency management compared to all the other customers that we have in different sectors. But one of the bigger, I wouldn't say fears, but I guess reservations about using our software is how do you communicate with your state if they use another software or a different integration or a different type of operation? And you've already kind of addressed it, but can you maybe talk about a case study or an example or an experience where the communication between the local and the state hasn't been compromised based off of the use of D4H or some sort of hopefully supportive statement in that regard? And if there isn't a supportive statement, I'd also like to hear kind of what you think we can improve to also increase that interoperability.
So we start looking at Southwest Ohio. In our region, we have 8 different counties. We have Hamilton County, which is huge, one of 3 big population centers for the state, all the way down to Adams County, which is a very rural, kind of on the river kind of location. We have state representatives that are for our region that are getting information from the counties to try to figure out, hey, what information needs to be elevated to the governor, what are some needs requests, or just to kind of see if something is going to be coming down the line. I share the static link to, again, all those different groups. And I've got a great relationship with our 3 different representatives, and they rarely have to call me and say, hey, what's the update? Because they've got that instant access.
Mhm.
And because of the way I've done that, a couple of neighboring counties that also use D4H have adopted the same different types of practice. So that really makes their job easier, because when they're rolling up reports, they can say, hey, based on this, and then here's this little link here to where you can see what the damaged housing is, or the number of people that were injured, or any evacuations and stuff. It makes it a lot easier. And again, you're not playing telephone where you tell someone, they write down the details in their own words, and then they tell someone else and all that. You're keeping that message consistent. And then we
Absolutely.
got some other counties that unfortunately do some fiscal limitations.
Yeah.
They just haven't gone out and were able to put something in place, right or wrong. It's just, their situation. They run their counties the way they've run their counties.
Absolutely. And just to reassure the audience on transparency here, we post all of our pricing on our website so you can see if it is within your budget or within an approachable way. I did not prep any of these questions to tell Tom beforehand, so this is completely just off the cuff here. There's no seated questions. And then also, I know that, so we got Katie on the back end today, so thank you so much, Katie. But a quick message in the chat there. Again, if anyone has questions, they want to pry a bit on Tom's experience and kind of working with the county, drop us in the chat and we'll veer off our dialogue here to address that. But going back to the question I wanted to bring up from what you talked about a little bit earlier. So again, one massive message that D4H pushes, and you've already reassured this in so many great ways, is that we're known for being simple. We're known for being the easy emergency management solution. And you've kind of already spoken to this, where even if you had a form or a status board or some sort of element in our software, you've iterated over it, you've changed it, you're still tweaking it, you're making those changes. And so can you just speak to kind of maybe, because I feel like a lot of other software may lack that type of accessibility or that ease of use to make changes on the fly or to evolve your software and your forms and your operations to your current needs. If you could talk kind of how, even starting from scratch, if you have to wipe everything and build it up again, kind of your experience with that with D4H.
I'm not sure how you would call it in terms of how you put the little data boxes, whether
The
it's in the
drag and drop
forms.
function.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just the drag and drop function. So we had a LEPC exercise last February in 2024. The
Mm-hmm.
scenario was a train mishap, and it was on the county between Clinton County and Fayette County.
Yep.
And we both had our EOCs running. We had people at the same place. We had people from the American Red Cross that were in our EOC, and one of the injects was they had to do, set up a shelter for the people in that area. And David, the gentleman who's representing the American Red Cross at that time, said, "Hey, you've got, this set up right now for something for how you're tracking shelters.
Mm-hmm.
There's this little piece that we do that's kind of separate." And I said, "Hold on." Boom, boom. And I said, "Like that?" And he just looked at me like I just showed him sliced bread for the first time in his life, and he was just impressed.
Yeah.
And it's just that being able to change things very quickly. Now, on the other side, sometimes when you get some of these people that aren't using the software, but they're saying, "Hey, I want to display it in a certain way," when they know that you can do it very easily, sometimes that can be a little bit of a demand when they're wanting to see things projected. So it's because of its flexibility, that's one of the bad things. But I want to go back to something.
Yeah.
The National Weather Service.
Yes.
Everyone's heard about some, the decreased budgets and some of the problems that they're going with. So when
Mm-hmm.
they have severe weather coming through, their staffing situation is usually a little bit more leaner than what they're used to. One of the things that occurred to me is instead of shooting them piecemeal, all the different damage reports for things that are occurring within our county, because in their area of operations, they got 52 counties in 3 states.
Right.
That's kind of a lot to do. Again, I shoot my little link and I say, "Hey, here's a storm report." And I'm putting every tree that's come down, every line that's come down, and it has a location where they can click on it, pulls up Google Maps. If there is a text notification, I put that picture on there for dispatch, and they can see all the details. And not once have I had the National Weather Service call me up saying, "Hey, I need a little bit more information on X, Y, or Z." It's just, "Hey, this is great. We love it."
Awesome. No, that's incredible too, because as we know, whether for good or for worse, our entire system is changing for supportive emergency management and resources for those items. And the fact that now you can kind of be that champion and that trailblazer from the ground up that can support that greater mission. I mean, that's just what emergency management is all about, eventually, to have some sort of universal system where we can all just click a button and talk to each other. So that's a really, really great anecdote. And continuing on that track as well. So I know that you talked about an exercise with the train accident. Are there any other either incidents or exercises you can speak to from your experience with D4H? And you already talked about, that information sharing and that quick whip ability. But is there any other, applications or I guess examples of your experience that you'd like to speak to using D4H?
Sure. Can I go ahead and throw up my screen?
Yeah, that'd be incredible.
I'm gonna slide you over here,
Yeah, no worries.
and let's go to window, and let's go here, and I'm going to share. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a pause,
Yep.
and
We're all set there.
I've got a couple of things here. Now, first off, if
Mm-hmm.
you recognize Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, there's a pretty much a good chance that you need to go have your colonoscopy or second colonoscopy scheduled.
That's
But
so
what
funny.
I try to have fun, different type scenarios for training, because
Yep.
when you do the same type of thing, there's always going to be someone that's going to sit there and say, "No, it wouldn't go that way." So sometimes you have to take the reality of it for people to understand, okay, let's focus now more on how we're putting the information in. So
Mm-hmm.
this little exercise right here was called McKay Station. And basically this is an alien attack. We had aliens land in Clinton County.
It's amazing.
Why Clinton County? I don't know, but we went through and we put this in. I actually had a little checklist,
Yeah.
and the folks had to go through and they had to input certain things as we were going through the exercise, where they can actually see the lifeline impacts
Nice.
on what was being impacted. Uh, we went through the different hazards and threats so that when they kind of drill down and say, hey, based on the information we had, what are some things that you're seeing reported from the field? And we had a little bit of fun with it. And it's just basically getting people to understand how this all works and the different ways you can bend it. So, for instance, we had one of the scenarios: UFO comes in, clips a small single engine plane, and then comes down and lands. Well, we actually went through and we had, some different information bits that people had to go through and they had to map where it occurred. And then we put in pictures of what was seen from the different people. And we gave people the opportunity to kind of sit down and write some of the impact descriptions and stuff. And so, because there was no reality, God, I hope there's no reality in this,
I hope
no
not.
reality in
Yeah.
this allows them to kind of dismiss reality for a little bit and focus more on the different types of tasks. And when you start letting them see how the different tools come into play,
Mhm.
that's where they can say, hey, I can see where all the different threats and the different aspects are coming in. And it allows them, I think, to kind of be a little bit more immersed in the training itself.
Absolutely. I mean, so gaming in emergency management is, I mean, it's definitely taken a big trend, a big step recently, but this is what I live for. This is the kind of
Mhm.
stuff that I think is so incredible. And so it's so refreshing to see something so creative. And I mean that so genuinely, because it's like it's the same old of types of scenarios. And now you're taking something completely crazy and you're applying it to the actual real life applications. And this is a total sidebar. I'm going to go on my little like nerdy rant for a second. But so my wife is in special education, and she's trying to find creative ways of teaching neurodivergent individuals. And she was like, what if I use Dungeon and Dragons or some sort of like fantasy game to apply mathematics, executive functioning, decision making, logical priorities, and you can tie in so many of these classic traditional academic elements in the same realm, emergency management elements, to something that forces you to be imaginative and creative and actually be like, okay, let me take my foundation and now apply it, because that's what emergency management is at the end of the day. It's a very creative response. So those are my two cents. That's so cool. I did want to briefly talk about this because mapping is a really big item here. I noticed some custom map layers that you uploaded here.
Mhm.
If you go down to your layer list there, so on the bottom there, is that from a pre-existing, like where your township's electrical, all the way at the bottom? Are those pre-existing GIS layers or from your county, or are they just ones that you created? If you could talk about the mapping a little bit more.
Well, as any emergency manager sitting out there is probably going to say, that's a no-no having maps of electrical systems because there aren't that are usually generally available. But one of the biggest problems I had when I first took this position back in 2019 was understanding where the power transmission lines were, where the distribution lines were, and some of the different variations. So I went out driving for about 2 days, hitting every road of the county, and just kind of looking where things are. And so a lot of the stuff, excuse me, I recreated myself. Now,
Nice.
another thing I've done, and I've got this in a lot of these exercise things, and I see if they're going to show up here. It
Is
may
it
not.
a tornado? I
It's
see a green sliver down there, unless
oh,
that's
there
part
we go.
of it. Okay.
There's one right there, and it's just that one. Nuts. I
Mhm.
thought I loaded the other one. I went through and I downloaded from the NWS Polygon page. I
Yeah.
can put that out there for anyone who
I know
wants that.
exactly what you're talking about. Yep. Hmm.
It essentially says, here's all the different polygons. You can download them in mass, all the KVM files, and then you can throw them on there. And I like to throw that up there so that when we are looking at forecasting severe weather, there's a high chance of tornadoes and all this stuff. I put that up there to give people an idea and understanding as to what the possible impacts are historically, so that they kind of understand, okay, this could be kind of a bad situation, or what the trend is. And where I have it set up is by years to actually go through there, and I can turn those off and I can turn them all on. And The only challenge is sometimes is when you import them, you don't, even though you've gone through and kind of picked what color you want it to be, sometimes the color doesn't stick, so you got to go back in and change the color on them. But
Yep.
it's just one of those nice visual tools.
No, absolutely. And, I think I've done it before for a few of the YouTube videos where I would take like the updated burn scars from California, or like I was doing a lot of demos for some environmental groups and I was showing like the oil offshores or something. And you can just simply import exactly what you're showing right now. And it's just such a powerful system in terms of integrating pre-existing mapping. So I'm so glad that you had that example as we were pulling that up as well. I did also want to ask as well, which I don't think I really have anywhere going with this, but were those photos AI, or how did you get were the photos?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Been using Chat GPT, getting a lot better at it. It's a very helpful tool. And for anyone out there who hates writing press releases, one of the great things about it, open up a Word document, just do bullet statements on the key facts and information. And if you've got some previous writing styles, you can dump it in and then put in that information and it will match. You can say, match this writing style, put this down and so forth. And what I find is sometimes the hardest thing is getting started. So if it gives you something that gets you started, a lot of people can edit pretty easily. And that is one of the best, I guess you would say, force multipliers, is it allows you to be able to be more effective in tailoring the message as in terms of trying to create it from scratch.
Yeah, and I, kind of, because if I keep going down this road, I'm gonna get off of the D4H software, and I feel like I want to try to keep as focused as I can, because I have so many other thoughts on AI as well. But I guess in terms of copying and pasting and integrating information into D4H, the biggest thing right now is everybody filling out their 214s on a piece of paper, or like how to kind of carry over information from form to form to form or to status board. How has your experience been with like duplicating documents or copying over information? Because some of those forms that you showed me, whether it was a situation or the sit rep or the other forms that you had or the status boards, there's a lot of information that requires a lot of typing and upkeep. So can you speak to that a little bit as well?
So I'll give you an example. Here I've got something that's called Priority 1 patients. These are patients or individuals in the county that are reliant on electrically powered medical devices because they have a serious medical condition.
Absolutely.
We have a great relationship with Council on Aging. They're the agency that oversees the senior kind of program in our county. And they have Excel spreadsheets on all the different groups or all the different programs, where there's the Aetna or there's different like TRICARE and different things like that. And they can provide that on a quarterly basis. And all I do is I go in, I delete everything that was in beforehand. I pull it in using a CVS. Now, the only thing, God bless them, is trying to get them to keep those Excel sheets consistent.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
Blanchester, all capitals, is one item. Blanchester spelled in mixed case is another item. And Blanchester, all lowercase, is a whole other thing. So when I get it, I actually have to go through and do a find and replace on some common different types of things. It takes a little bit of while, but if anything happens, I've got this built up to where I can pull it in. I'm not showing all the different details because there are some HIPAA type stuff. But this tells me what fire district, what EMS district, their locations, it's mapped out. So if we had, say, let's say some icing coming in, we can pull that up. And then as we have our ESF 8 person, someone there from Council on Aging that's making the contacts, and they say, hey, this person is out of power, they need to be evacuated to a shelter, then we've got our EMS person right there that can do the coordination. And then we can track it. And just like on your shelter, I think you called emergency facilities when I first had this, but you just, it's, what do they call that? Well, you get the relationship tables and you can say this person is now moved and they're at this location. And it's very quick and easy because the Red Cross can now look through and say, yep, your list matches our list.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so good that you brought up the relationship field too, because I think what might scare some people with any software, right? Yes, we're a no-code platform, but there are some confusing concepts like relationships, or even if you wanted to do advanced options, you can copy and paste in specific coding syntax that we provide you, but you can still fill in, the puzzle pieces from there. the relationship one is so important. And I've used this specifically for some recent public health and healthcare oriented customers, but you can track the entire life cycle of a patient from pickup to transport to discharge with those relationship fields, because you click one button on one status board and then you see it pop to another status board to another one, and you get that whole thing audited and tracked. So even when you're doing the after action report, you can say, man, it took 20 minutes to get to this hospital, like what's going on with our like telehealth or a transportation or something. It's incredibly insightful.
And then you can go through and color code it along the way also, so that way it's a visual tool also.
Exactly. Incredible. That's so exciting. I got really amped when I saw the alien thing. That's so cool. That's my niche right there. So, well, before I switch over to some other topics, because I know that we're winding down on time here for the last 10 minutes, is there anything while we're in the software here that you want to kind of just talk about or show off or talk about your experience with D4H before I talk about more so your evolution experience of kind of using the software for the past few years?
All right, so I'm going to want to see if I can do this presentation thing here. So I'm going to go presentations. And I'm going to show an example. Remember when we had Hurricane Helena come through the area?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see how this works. All right.
Yep.
So here is an example of a form that I've gone through. And let me maximize this because I've got old eyes. And this is something that I sent to the National Weather Service. And this is something that there are elements that they can click on to be able to check locations, or they can see the pictures. And it was very useful for them. And this is 13 pages of information of damage that was in our county. So imagine receiving individual emails, phone calls, and different things, trying to piece it together. This way, everything is all together in one piece.
And it looks incredibly clean too for the like it's pretty digestible in terms of just seeing it for the, like if I this is the first time I'm seeing this, obviously, and immediately I can directly understand what you're trying to present to me, what you're trying to show me. And thank God you didn't send me 13 pages of emails or like individual, notifications. I would be so pissed if I was on the other end of that. That'd be a lot for sure. That's
now
awesome.
How do I turn off this presentation piece?
Oh, it should be an X button on the bottom of your toolbar, and then Katie will also disappear.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. So I do have a few other questions. So let's see how this, because I totally lost track of what I was going to. I got so involved in that. That was so refreshing. I can't think of another adjective to actually like express my hype around that. So let's talk about, I guess, how you've used it. So I joined D4H in 2024. You've used the software since 2021. We've talked about a lot of features. We've talked about a lot of experiences, but how has it been using the software from year to year to year? And have you noticed any changes? Has your operations gotten easier? Really just generally, how has it been being a long-term customer with D4H?
All right. So I think I started in 2020. Back when we had that whole COVID thing. So that was very, very interesting.
Right. Who could forget?
Oh, wait, was I not supposed to use that word?
Oh,
I don't know. All right. So the answer I'm going to give, I think may sound one way, but I see it as very positive.
Absolutely.
When I first used it, it was amazing. And it hasn't gone up since then because it was always so high to begin with. I was always able to bend it one way or the other. The only thing that depresses me is I wish I had more money to pull in the after action reporting kind of thing, because I think that would be very handy. Absolutely. But I found that I can go through and actually create a form as my own after action. So that way, after these different storms, I've got a little emergency notice page. And if you scroll down through there, you can see all the different previous events. I try to link it to different things. So that way, if it's a hazmat spill, the hazmat report is there. If it is a weather report, you can go to the NWS page and you can see all that information on the storm itself. So I try to make it where it's very informative, and D4H allows that to happen because I can create those different PDF documents.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting too, it's interesting to hear that perspective of how it hasn't really changed fundamentally speaking, right? But I think also at little points there are little tiny feature releases, I think. I don't know, like, is there any specific features that you didn't have in 2020 that you have now that have kind of made, has been helpful or less helpful, I guess, in either sense?
Rich text. I mean,
That's
it sounds
right.
simple, but
Mhm.
it's a way to be able to draw attention to key different things and emphasize certain things that was extremely helpful. There's the alerts piece that is out
Yes.
there, and that's one of the things that we're looking at because everyone has a mass notification system.
Right.
We're looking to see kind of how that works and some of the new changes that are coming out on that, and that might be some of the different things that we roll out to. It's just we're looking at that National Weather Service severe thunderstorm warning
Yep.
aspect that they send out those types of alerts that
Absolutely.
we're interested in.
Yep.
So these things that are along the lines are very interested. But the one thing I'm keeping my ear kind of out for is
Hmm.
with the I guess you would say the commonness of use of drones in response
Yes, I've heard that a
is
lot.
is how elements of that could be incorporated here because a lot of places they're not using the streaming service because it's a little expensive, but depending
Yep.
upon the controller you have, you can actually do Teams or you can do GoToMeeting and
Mhm.
actually be able to set up and stream what the drone is seeing. So if
Mm.
there's a way of being able to have some of those virtual type meetings
Mhm.
that's baked in so that you can kind of view it. That could
Yep.
be something to where you can set up a page, and if there's live drone video, that can show up there, including the chat option, because sometimes you have people at different locations and
Mhm.
still have that same security that you have where you can limit who can go to which one of those status boards or those pages.
Absolutely. So I'm probably gonna have to put my foot in my mouth, but it's fine. I'll deal with it after. I do know that we are for the alerting for the notification piece. We are going to be releasing very, very shortly. Our product team is working extremely hard on the product. Microsoft Teams alerts and also conference calling.
Mhm.
I think that'd be a good start in the right direction. So it's interesting you mentioned that because I do think that is very close on the horizon of some band-aid in terms of at least giving users the opportunity to figure out that solution with our software. So
Yeah, when
convenient.
you guys were on that little trip in Canada, I think you guys were probably talking about that a lot, right?
All the yeah, it was a work trip. Yeah, that's what we'll call it. So I do have, I think, probably two more, maybe three more. I don't know. We'll see how I feel. I'm trimming down here. So I know that we talked about one element, but if you can go back to when you first purchased the software, and apart from maybe building too many status boards, but what is one tip that you would give about D4H as a new user, knowing your experience with the software now?
Find someone else that's using it and find out how they used it wrong. That
Gotcha.
way you're not recreating that type of situation. And once a year, the counties here around here that use it, we get together and we say, hey, what do you do that's new? And we share that information. But again, not to keep kicking a dead horse, that those static links, when
Yeah.
we share those with our neighboring EMAs, it's an
Hmm.
easy way for them to be able to stay in the loop and see what's actually going on. But one other thing that I'd like to toss in here before I forget it
Yeah.
is when you get a license, you have so many different licenses.
Yes.
But when you start putting the people in there, the personnel, that can fill up kind of quick.
Hmm.
So I wonder if there might be a way in the future to where you can load it up with however many people, but you're only clicking which ones are active. So that
Hmm.
way you can use all 50 licenses during a shift or during a 24
Absolutely.
hour, where you can have some of that control without having to delete and then recreate.
I was going to say, yeah, right now we just have to delete and recreate. A checkbox system would be really interesting in that regard too. I think also, I know that this is in like very basic conversation, but the idea of surge users
Mhm.
as well, because not every incident's the exact same. You can try to purchase a larger license to prepare for, I don't know, what, 50 users, 100 users, but that may happen once every 5 years. So why would you spend the money on something unless you actually need that need for it? So yeah, I hear that critique as well. And speaking of critiques, I think probably maybe the second to last question, I promise, is is despite all of your great glowing reviews of D4H, what do you wish it could be doing better, or what could it improve, or what would you like to see it do in the future? And it's okay if you don't have one, but also I like to give our customers the opportunities to always talk very candidly
Yeah.
about the product as well.
make GP a little less friendly. He is overly friendly and too wanting to help people. I would say the same thing for Maria, because when we first set this thing up, I felt like I was just bugging her every other day, but she just, oh yeah, boom, 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 popping real fast, boom, it's done.
Yeah.
And it just, but let's see. I think just that personnel piece,
Yeah.
I think that would be a real game changer.
Yep. Yeah. No, for me, I know that I've said this a few times. I think I would love our dashboards to be a little bit more robust. And then also I'd like our, like, yes, incident management, you have that connectivity within the actual module, but right now we don't, like, it doesn't talk to all the other software. Like, it talks to incident reporting, alerting, talks to personnel and training, like the equipment management piece. Like, it doesn't dump into incident management or so. So like, I would love to also see maybe some interoperability on the D4H side. I think that's also something I can add in there. So wonderful. As we are lining up here right at the 45-minute mark, just one, yeah, I know, right? It was the aliens. That's where the time flew. But just one last little question before I sign us off here is, any parting advice? I mean, apart from the question I previously asked you about 2020, but, like, for everyone on the chat here, any parting thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Find someone that's using it, sit in, actually have them set up a license for you and pop in there and just create a training scenario and just toy around it. And you'll see how easy it is to go on the admin side and actually create those different tools.
Yeah.
There is one thing, and I'm trying to think, when you are setting up a board, if you save it, sometimes it challenges and it doesn't let you go back and edit certain boxes.
Yes.
And I think that was a recent thing.
It is a recent thing, and that is to prevent truncation of the data. So what happens is every box you create, it creates a unique field ID for each of those boxes. So that way, when you keep editing it or keep going back, the software doesn't get confused thinking you're overwriting one thing for the next. So it did ever so slightly make it a little bit more of just like a manual process, but in the long run, it does protect your operability of using stuff seamlessly. So I hear that, but there was a good reason to it. I had to get used to it as well, because I was so used to whipping out status boards, and then I was like, oh, this is new. So
well, I was always pretty good at coming up with a naming convention where if I'm putting points of contact, point of contact 1, point of contact 2, and the same thing, point of contact phone 1.
Yeah.
Just,
I got you. Absolutely. Well, Tom, we are a little bit over time, but thank you again so much for coming back. Maybe we'll have you back again another 3 years, hopefully. So big thank you to Tom. Big thank you to Katie on the back end for putting this all together. As always, you can always visit our website. You can always visit our social media and follow D4H there. But Tom, thanks again, and have a great rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Have a good one.